We are sorry to have kept you waiting. We would now like to begin the Innovative City Forum seminar. We would like to look at the paradigm shift as a result of open innovation. In the Innovative City Forum, we would like to look at the city and lifestyles of the future. We are looking at leading-edge technologies, art and creative elements, urban development, and we are discussing the subject of the future of cities 20 years ahead. And the event is held every year in October, starting from 2013. On October the 14th, this will be held during this autumn for a 3-day period. Today we have a special session with the participation of Mark Hutch. First of all, we will be hearing from Mark Hutch. He will be talking about the situation of innovation in the United States right now. After that, with the editor of Wired magazine in Japan, there is going to be a panel discussion with Kei Wakabayashi having a dialogue with Mark Hutch. First of all, we would like to hear from the co-founder and CEO of Tech Shop, Mark Hutch. Please, we would like to welcome Mark Hutch. Let us give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have an opportunity to talk about the maker movement and open innovation in the United States, and then to hopefully have a conversation about what it might mean here in Japan. So first of all, my publisher requires that I ask you to buy my book, so please buy my book. Before we get too started, so I truly believe that we're in the middle of a revolution. The maker movement, along with robotics, information technology, design technology, is enabling everybody to be able to participate in making. And this is truly revolutionary. And as a former Green Beret, I love revolutions. And I love blowing things up, like business models and doors and walls and so forth. So I'm going to ask you to help me with the presentation. Occasionally I'm going to say something, and I'm going to show you some interesting projects that are actually quite revolutionary and very exciting. And so I'm going to ask you to shout, boom. Now, I'll warn you, I'll go 1, 2, 3, and then you'll all yell boom in different parts throughout the presentation. So we're going to practice real quick. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Not so good. Little more energy. 1, 2, 3. Boom. That's better. All right, let's get started. So Tech Shop is becoming a recognized brand in the makerspace. We have 8 locations in the U.S. right now. We have 20 projects in development. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Tech Shop is a membership-based, do-it-yourself fabrication workshop. What that means is for $125 a month, you can become a member of our shop and come in and use it. Do-it-yourself means you do it. You have access to our tools. You make the projects. You make the things that you're interested in making. We don't do it for you. And open access means anybody 16 years old or older can come in and use any tool they want in the space once we've trained them. You can be as young as 12 years old and use some of the machines unsupervised, and you can be as young as 8 years old and be part of an after-school type of a program. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't believe that innovators necessarily follow the clock. Just because it's midnight doesn't mean it's time to go to bed. It may mean it's time to make that project one step further. It takes about 1,200 square meters to have a full-blown tech shop. We like to say it's every tool you need to make anything on the planet. And I'm going to show you a wide array of projects. We teach hundreds of classes a month in every location. So we teach you how to use a welding machine, how to use a computer numerically controlled machine, how to use a laser cutter or a 3D printer. We do not assume that you know how to use it. We are different, though, in that we believe in DIY. So we'll give you a 3-hour class on how to use a welding machine, and then you're on your own. You learn how to weld on your own. It's not a 12-week course. It's not a big certificate. It's 2 or 3 hours, how to use a machine safely, and you're off and running. And typically, it's enough to be able to move your project from where you are now to where you want it to go. We also do lots of corporate events, which are a lot of fun. Lasers and beer, welding and wine, water jet and whiskey, power tools and alcohol. It's a wonderful combination, and it makes for a great evening of fun and entertainment. So the types of tools we have every tool you need. So machine tools, mills and lathes, computer numerically controlled machines, like a vertical mill, or a 3D printer, which is also computer numerically controlled. We have laser cutters. The laser cutter is easy to use, incredibly powerful, and amazingly addictive. We call it our gateway drug. So if you're a pusher in San Francisco, you always try to give them a drug that is very powerful, easy to use, and addictive. That's the laser cutter. If you don't know what it is that you want to do, or you don't know what to make, we encourage you to come in and use the laser cutter, because at that point, we know you're going to come in every day and spend all your money on us, it's a great tool. We have people accidentally start businesses after learning how to use this one tool. We've had a homeless man who spent his last $50 on a special 1-month introductory and a laser cutter class, and he completely rebooted his entire life after taking that one class. It's a very useful tool. We have a complete metal shop, including sheet metal benders and so forth, welding, MIG and TIG welding, and acetylene torches. I always recommend to my friends in the city, if you're looking for a date night, take the welding class together. It's fabulous. You get to deal with primordial fire and melted steel. It's a great evening event. We have a water jet. This is a computer numerically controlled machine. We can teach you how to use it in 2 hours. It cuts through 5 inches thick of anything on the planet: concrete, granite, carbon steel, cows, pigs, birthday cakes, pizza boxes. We've tried them all. It will cut through absolutely everything. And you could come in one day and the next day be making a granite countertop for your kitchen. It's a fabulous tool. We have a complete woodworking shop, including computer numerically controlled machines. What that means is, after taking 2 or 3 classes, an introduction to design using a computer, introduction to a computer numerically controlled router, you become a master woodworking craftsman. This is new to the world. You've never been able to become a master woodworking craftsman in 3 class sessions over a period of 2 days. You'll be able to produce all kinds of interesting things, and I'll talk about what some people have made to help create businesses. We have a complete plastics lab, including a plastics molding machine, a vacuform machine. The software is one of the key enablers. Autodesk is one of our funders. We have over a $30,000 software load from Autodesk on every single one of the computers in the space. National Instruments is also another partner. They help with the electronics. If you're working on an Internet of Things project, there's a high probability that you'll use National Instruments software and hardware. We have a textiles lab for doing clothing or sailcloth or leather, commercial grade sewing machines, sergers, and actually a 12-foot long arm quilting machine. We can turn you into a master quilter in about 2 hours. After that class, you can download some designs and go off and quilt. We have a large project bay for doing bigger projects. I mentioned the team and group building events. They're an awful lot of fun. But what we're actually doing is building a community of the most creative people in every city that we go to. We're not really in the tool business. People get distracted by the tools because they're kind of fun and exciting and big and powerful. But that's not the important thing. What's important for us is to build a space that gets to 500 members or more, so that you become 2 degrees of freedom from success. Because once you've aggregated the most creative people in the city across every domain, arts, electronics, architecture, mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, bioengineering, burners, as we call them in San Francisco, who like to combine art and big propane cannons that fire great big balls of fire. When you bring all of those people together and they're working on a daily basis together, and you run into a problem, you go to one of our staff members, we call them dream consultants, and you ask them, I've got this problem, can you help me? And if they can't help you, which is the first degree, there is somebody on site right now who can solve that problem. That's a critical piece of open innovation. When you've created an open culture in a community where people will share their knowledge and ideas freely in this community because you've architected it correctly, it becomes one of the most powerful creative engines in a city. And we see it happen on a daily basis where somebody runs into a problem, they talk to somebody else in the space, and they solve that problem and move on to the next thing. This is what Tech Shop is. This is what a high-quality makerspace is. It's about the community. It's not about the tools. The tools attract the community. The community is what drives innovation and creativity. So our mission is to help drive global innovation by engaging, enabling, and empowering the creative class to build their dreams. We grow through our partner network. We no longer put up the capital to open a location. We have our partners that do that. So General Electric, DARPA, Arizona State University, BMW, and Autodesk have helped fund locations across the United States, in BMW's case in Munich, which we just opened a couple of weeks ago. I'll give you an example. Arizona State University, largest public university in the United States. They were planning on opening an innovation lab in Chandler, Arizona, and the city of Chandler had helped attract the capital to build or to refurbish a 40,000 square foot facility. But ASU was going to build a lab, a smaller lab than what we have, and it was only going to be available to the graduate students in the graduate master's degree in engineering. It was not going to be open to the community. It was not going to be open to the architectural school or the art school. It was not going to be open to high schoolers or junior hires. It was just going to be for the graduate students. This is normal. This is the way most universities do it. They have a lab, it's for the architectural students. They have a lab, it's for the art students. They have a lab, it's for the electrical engineering department. But we now know there are better ways of doing this. Again, this is the open innovation idea, where what you need to do is build a lab that's open to everybody, because you want every discipline there. You want every age group there. You want every kind of entrepreneur and company that's in the community to come in and work together. And so when we shared what our vision was and what we had been doing in our locations in the Bay Area, the vice provost of ASU immediately signed on and said, no, you know what, I don't want to own a lab. I want you to own and operate the lab at Arizona State. And already we have 800 students from ASU that are using the facility, and they're using it side by side with companies like Intel and General Dynamics and Boeing. They're doing it side by side with junior high and elementary school students who are now seeing engineers that are like them doing interesting things, and it makes the kids get more interested in STEM education. So we grow through our partners. Fujitsu is our most recent partner. We've just done a 24-foot long trailer, about, is that 6 meters or 4 meters? And it has laser cutters and 3D printers and electronics in it, and it's now going all over the Bay Area, introducing elementary school kids and junior high kids to advanced manufacturing and helping them understand why science is so important and so practical for them, that gets them excited about science. We're working on a number of other projects with Fujitsu in the open innovation space. We have 8 locations open today. We've got 11 in development in the United States and around the world. So we just opened Munich. We'll be opening Paris and Abu Dhabi later this year. We're in active discussions with 12 more. We've got targets. So we're on track to have at least, we currently have 8, we'll have at least 18 open by the end of this year. Our objective eventually is to have hundreds of them around the world, because again, our mission is to help drive global innovation. I often get asked, though, if you're into the maker movement, you get the Make magazine, and it's focused on craft projects and kind of introduction to electronics and soldering and fairly easy to do projects. And if you've been to a maker fair and you see all the little kids running around and all the interesting art people dressed in funny, interesting ways. You can get the impression that the maker movement is not about business. It's not about economic development. It's not about higher education. It's really about just fun and engagement. And that is true. The maker movement is about fun and engagement, and is about the young kids, and it is about craft projects. But there's a very serious side to the maker movement as well. And because our locations are so large and we have so many members, we on average have 800 members at each location. San Francisco has 1,200 members alone. We are seeing some amazing projects come out of our space. I'm going to go through some of them. This is the world's fastest electric motorcycle. It was built from the ground up in our Menlo Park location. They did the carbon fiber fairing. They did the aluminum frame. They milled the electric engine. They built the Superbike electronic harness. They basically built everything that they couldn't get off the shelf. They had to manufacture themselves. This has got the Guinness Book and World Records for the fastest electric motorcycle. It did 218 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats. I think that was 330 kilometers an hour. It just won a major race in the United States. The second place finisher, a Ducati Monster Superbike, came in second, 20 seconds later. When was the last time you saw a professional race where the second place finisher came in 20 seconds later? I've never seen it in my entire life. 1, 2, 3, boom. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, boom. All right, very good. Andy's working on a jetpack. Nobody else is, so Andy is. We've had 3 CubeSat satellites that have already launched out of the International Space Station from college projects in the San Jose area. This is one of my favorites. So Max, his day job after going to college and getting a design degree was designing cabinets for a major retailer. If you're designing cabinets for a retailer, one of the jobs of a cabinet is to be invisible, because it's about the merchandise that sits on the cabinet. It's not about the cabinet. So can you imagine, after spending years becoming a professional designer, your job is to be invisible? Most designers I know don't want to be invisible, and Max didn't want to be invisible either. So he wanted to open a light company. So he took the laser cutter class. He took the Arduino class, which is an introduction to electronics class. He's not an electronic engineer, but if you learn enough about Arduino, you can emulate what something might look like once you've scaled it up. And then I ran into him and I asked him, what's your plan? How are you going to get to the next stage? And he said, I'm going to go I'm going to launch a Kickstarter campaign, and I'm going to look for $60,000. And I told Max, that's a lot of money. The average hardware Kickstarter campaign at $2,500 doesn't get funded. Half of all the hardware Kickstarter campaigns at the time he was doing it failed if they were asking for more than $2,500. Max is asking for $60,000. That puts him in the top 10% of all successful campaigns. So I was telling Max, you've got to find a way to reduce the cost. Yeah. He raised $480,000. 1, 2, 3, boom. Quit his job, launched his company. Now he's done millions of dollars with this lamp. He took 3 classes and completely remade his career. He now owns a multi-million-dollar lamp company. This is what it means to start a new industrial revolution, where you enable creatives to be able to pursue their dreams and achieve them, in very short order. Anton is very similar. This was a collapsible, so I run into Anton in San Francisco, and he's literally standing on top of a table, wrestling a 12-foot piece of plastic and losing. He was not getting it to do what he wanted to do. So I went over him. He was pretty obvious he was doing something crazy. So I went over and asked him, Anton, I'm Mark, what are you doing? And he tells me, I'm making a collapsible kayak. Now, you know, I'm a former corporate guy with an MBA, little bit cynical. A collapsible kayak, that's a terrible idea. Why would you want a collapsible kayak? If I'm out in the San Francisco Bay, I don't want to be in a boat that collapses. I want to be in a boat that's firm. And so his description, I says, you know, Anton, I'm not sure about this collapsible kayak idea, but I know for a fact that you need to change what you're calling it. So you'll notice it's called Oru kayak as an origami kayak. But again, I don't know, what's the size of the market for kayaks to begin with? It's not that big. What's the size of the market for kayaks that fold? It's even smaller. What's the size of a market for a folding kayak from some random guy who's never made a kayak in his life? I'm not convinced. He launches a Kickstarter campaign. He's looking for about $50,000. He raises almost $500,000. It turns out there's a market for collapsible kayaks. But here's what's interesting. 10 or 15 years ago, in order for him to launch this company, it would have cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to build that prototype, because he would have had to gone off and done it with someone else. He's too young to have assets like that. A bank is not going to loan him $200,000. An angel group is not going to fund a collapsible kayak company because there is no exit. Yet today, because of the combination of a makerspace where he spent like $2,000 and Kickstarter where he could gain access to $500,000 in capital to build them, he has launched a very successful kayak company. And 10 years ago, it wasn't possible. We are living in an entirely new era where it is possible for anybody with a great idea to prototype it and make it. 1, 2, 3, boom. This is a dodo case, and I love this one. Patrick came in and asked, what classes do I need to take to learn how to make an iPad case out of bamboo and bookbinding? Very simple idea. It was 3 classes. Introduction to computer numerically controlled machines, introduction to the computer numerically controlled router, and a textiles class where the instructor knew something about bookbinding. Patrick took these classes after being told that's what he needed to do. Within 90 days from asking the question, what classes do I need to take, he had sold $1 million in product. 90 days. What did you do last summer? He built a multi-million-dollar company and didn't even know how to use the tools when he got started. He did $4 million in the first year, $10 million in the second, $35 million in the third. We think he may do $60 to $100 million this year. His lead user is literally the President of the United States, right there. President Obama visited a tech shop in Pittsburgh, and the first thing he said after introducing, he says, hi, I'm President Obama. It's like, I kind of know who you are. My name's Mark. He says, hey, my staff told me that I've got a product that was made at a tech shop. He told the Secret Service agent, go get my iPad. He grabbed his iPad and he was showing us the iPad case. Like, this was made at tech shop. So yeah, I know, you're in my deck. But none of those ideas have changed the world. And we had a hypothesis early on that if you gave the creative class access to the tools of the Industrial Revolution, they could change the world. And these next projects have. So this is Square. That came out of our Menlo Park location. The story behind the story is that they went to venture capitalists with a PowerPoint, and they didn't get funded. And then James came into Tech Shop, built the prototype, went back out to the venture capitalist, and they got funded. If Jack Dorsey can't raise money without a prototype, how do you expect your middle managers or your entrepreneurs to start a hardware company without a prototype? You can't. If Jack Dorsey can't do it, you can't do it either. You've got to get to the prototype. What's changed is they're cheap and easy. A couple $1,000s at the most, and you can build the prototype. And that is miraculous. Phil and Bob created the world's most efficient data cooling center system. It was eventually rated by the Department of Energy as the most efficient on the globe. They beat IBM and Emerson in a head-to-head competition. Emerson licensed the technology. Nick and his team were ranked as one of the top 5 agricultural startups of the year this last year. It figures out how much fertilizer is already in the ground, so you only put enough fertilizer on, saving the farmer money and saving the environment from the nitrogen runoff that comes off by over-fertilizing. Vinod Khosla, one of the top venture capitalists in the world, is one of their funders. They've raised $20 million to date. This won a Fast Company Social Hardware of the Year award. It's a camp stove that will also charge your electronics. Now, this is not so important in the first world, but in the second and third world, where you have rolling brownouts and you don't know whether or not you're going to have electricity during the day, this can be a lifesaver. Trevor was another top 5 agricultural startup of the year award. And then my personal favorite, Jane Chen and Naganan Murthy, coming out of the Stanford Design School, came up with an incubation blanket. And the idea here is there's a polymer that goes in the back that keeps this at the right temperature. And it turns out, globally, 500,000 babies die every year when they're born 2 weeks too early. They can't get to an incubator within an hour, they die. So Jane's idea was, can we extend that by another hour? And when they graduated from Stanford, they had extended it by 1 hour. Then magic happened. They came to Menlo Park, they interacted with the community, and a polymer chemist helped Naganan extend that 1 hour to 4 hours. So you go, okay, that's a 3-fold increase. Except we're dealing with geography, right? It's actually a 9-fold improvement in the reach of this blanket. This blanket has saved 150,000 babies' lives. And if our makerspace didn't exist when they had graduated, this wouldn't have existed either. So let's talk a little bit more about open innovation. A couple of slides to go. So Ford came to us and said, we want you to open in Detroit, and we told them no. We don't really want to go to Detroit. And they said, no, really, we want you to come to Detroit. We'll pay you to come to Detroit. It's like, well, that's interesting. That wasn't our business model then. That is our business model now. We'll pay you to come to Detroit. And we asked him, why would you do that? And he says, well, we have 3 objectives. Any one of these would pay for the entire experiment. The first one is, we would like to see a 10% increase in patentable ideas coming in to Tech Shop, or coming into Ford. 10%, if we get a 10% increase, that'll pay for everything. If we could get one new product idea from our relationship, not even out of Detroit, but from our relationship onto the car, that'll pay for the whole idea. If you start working with our research and development community in any way so that they're more open to open innovation, that will be a huge win. So any one of those would have done the trick. So the last one, currently the research and development community is writing us the biggest checks. In the first 2 years, they didn't write us a single one. Now, why? They have all the tools they need. They control all the tools. We like to say they have big boy tools. We have little mills. They have really big industrial mills. Why is the research community at Ford spending money at Tech Shop? And the answer is because in Ford, like many companies, they have a stage-gated new product development process with the assumption that this first stage, when you approve something, it's going to be incredibly expensive to build that prototype. And in many instances it is, and you need access to the really big boy tools in order to make it happen. But what they've discovered recently is in many instances they don't need to spend $1 million, and they don't need access to these big tools. And for a couple $100, they can just send their people over to Tech Shop and expand their pipeline of new products coming into R&D. It's a huge win for Ford. And according to the program officer, that alone would have paid for the whole thing. There is a new product idea that came out of one of their marketing departments. Let me say that again. It came out of their marketing department. How often does marketing get to play in the research and development lab? Never. So now, because they have access to a lab, they can, and they came up with an idea. And then here is the most amazing thing. We were hoping for a 10% increase. We've seen a 100% increase in high-quality patentable ideas coming in to Ford's patent office. A 100% increase. That's called cognitive surplus. What can you do as a manager to tap in to the extra brain power that is sitting in the desks from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day? And one of the ways you can do that is by enabling them to create things that they've never been able to do before. And the other example I want to give is DARPA, because it's just such a surprise. DARPA's concern was currently in the United States, if you want to launch a new platform, a military platform, it's basically a $10 billion commitment, and it will take 10 years. Minimum. $10 billion in 10 years. And DARPA was going, and the problem is that it's going up and to the left. If the current is one of those, if the current trajectory is true by 2050, all of the GDP will be spent on one platform. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but their question is, well, if that's not going to happen, what is going to happen? And so they came up with this idea of leveraging open innovation. So this was literally a public call. We want to build a new fighting vehicle that will work in the desert. And they open it up to anybody in the United States to compete for it. And all kinds of people came out of the woodworks to compete. They had 3 months to finish the design, 90 days, not 10 years. And then once they identified the winner, they had 90 days to build it. So what you're looking at is the final product, $1 million, 6 months to build a military platform. If DARPA can do it, if Ford can do it, so can your company. And that's why I think open innovation is such a critical piece of our understanding about new product development in the future. And that's it for my comments. I think we'll sit down and have a nice conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, we would like to move on to the panel discussion, and the moderator will be the chief editor of Wired magazine in Japan, Kei Wakabayashi. Let us welcome him with applause. Well, we would like to ask Mr. Wakabayashi to take over. How do you do? My name is Wakabayashi from Wired magazine. Best of regards. It was a very interesting presentation. Listening to a presentation like this, how should I say it? I want to pursue more dreams, but I tend to forget things the day after. In Wired magazine, well, there's chief editor Chris Anderson in the United States that runs the US Wired magazine, and he was editing for a long time, but he decided to start up a drone company, so he left. His book is quite famous. There's a book called Makers, and he decided to pursue his ideas that he wrote in his book in his own life. And 3 years ago, we invited Chris Anderson to talk about the maker movement. And he said that everybody was going to be involved in the making process. And everybody could be the next Matsushita or the next Sony. We appreciated his words. That was 3 years ago that he said that, but it's quite difficult to realize what he talked about. And then after that, we've seen the maker movement and open innovation. These are commonly used words, but in society, it has not yet become a major trend. And so people are feeling quite frustrated. And that's what I've been feeling for the past 3 years. But listening to today's presentation, I'm astonished at what America is able to accomplish. And I'd like to ask a few questions today. Why is it that we can't realize a situation like that in Japan is something that I'm always thinking about. I find it difficult as I listen to presentations like this. And in regard to tech shop, the customers are what kind of people? I'd like to understand what are the type of people who come to tech shops. And so in regard to the people who come to tech shops, what are the common type of people who come?
Five basic types of folks that come in. It's a custom demographic. The first is hobbyists, and these are people who like model trains or 3D printers or drones or clothing or whatever. They've got a hobby. It HEATS, H-E-A-T-S, so hobbyist entrepreneurs, artists, tinkerers, and students. Those are the basic five. The entrepreneurs fall into three categories. There's the real serious entrepreneur who has venture capital funding or wants to get venture capital funding and they want to have a big exit or acquisition. Then there's a significant portion of entrepreneurs who I describe and others describe as a lifestyle business. So Max, the Lumia lamp, is a lifestyle business. He's never going to be able to go public. He may do 10 or $15 million in sales, which isn't enough for an angel group or a venture capital group to get excited about. That's a pretty substantial portion of folks that come in. And then the third category is people that are just trying to make a little bit of extra money on the side. Maybe it's a hobby or, they're amateurs at something, and so they'll sell something on Etsy or eBay, or they'll go to weekend swap meets and sell things there. Artists, we love them because they add spice to the community and they know how to make things. They were taught with their hands how to make things, and so they add a lot of knowledge, tacit knowledge to the community. They're also a lot more entertaining. They'll come at a tool, and instead of saying, I want to make this and I'm going to use that tool, they'll look at the tool and say, I wonder what I can do with this tool, which tends to break them, but they break them in interesting ways. And then we have the tinkerers, which is a catch-all category. That's, if I need something welded or I need to fix a drawer or something fairly simple, we call that a tinkerer. And then students. And the students are everything from an 8-year-old all the way up to an 80-year-old lifetime learner and everything in between. So those are the kind of the categories. It's a very diverse group of people.
で、それの
What would be the percentage of each segment that you just talked about?
So it's probably 40% entrepreneurs in those three categories, and then probably 20% students, and then the rest is broken up between the artist and the hobbyist. So it's heavy on the entrepreneurial front.
で、ビジネス上はやっぱりそういうなんて
Business-wise, then, people who want to start up their companies are the type of people who you'd like to increase the most, do you think? Do you want the percentage of entrepreneurs to increase?
I like it where it is, maybe even a little bit less. I'd like to see more hobbyists and more artists and students in the mix. Because again, they add a lot of really interesting projects and things that they're trying to do. So I'm kind of happy with where we're at.
それはやっぱりある種趣味で
Because the hobbyists or the entrepreneurs and the artists create a diversity that is very important for your environment. Is that it?
Exactly. If you had all entrepreneurs, it would create this kind of pressure cooker of everybody's trying to launch to a particular date, and what's the size of the market, and how am I going to get my message out, and so forth, where artists and students don't have those concerns. And so it's nice to have that mix of people there. And then sometimes, you'll operate in different categories. So, there may be an entrepreneur, but on the side, they've got a hobby, and so they'll come in and play with drones instead of working on their entrepreneurial gig.
僕ちょっとウェブ
Well, I've checked your website yesterday, and in Detroit, in March, there was an event calendar, and I took a memo of that. my mixer notes, but it seems quite interesting. There's a drone meetup on the 9th, on the 14th, a concept coffee and pie day, a pie social event. What's this? What's this pie day?
15, right? 315,
Yeah.
3.1527. It's pi.
Ah,
Pi.
I see.
Yeah, it's Pi Day.
でみんなでパイ食べる
All
ん
the
ですね
geeks
こ
come
れ
out on Pi Day.
これ何やるんですかこの
What do you do on this pie day?
ああなるほどなるほどなるほどいいですねこれで
That's interesting. And so the members get together, eat pies together.
Yes, all the geeks got together and ate pies.
なるほどなるほどとかですね
And another thing, ladies' night is on the calendar. That was 24th of March, ladies' event, right?
Geeky ladies are hot.
なるほどなるほどみたいななんか非常
I'll say. Very interesting. Lots of interesting events. And you said that there will be a great dating event. I guess that's true.
Holiday night is a lot of fun.
ねだからなんかそういう意味ではな
So yes, in that sense, I guess you can say that they're very entertaining. And I think it's a good thing that you can start from that entertaining aspect. So it's a socializing, entertaining events as well. That's a very important aspect, right?
We actually describe ourselves as a experience-based, transformative retailer. So the experience-based is you want to give people a wonderful experience while they're there, hopefully then leading them to pick up new skills and potentially, new opportunities. Transformative is a particular class of experience service offering, and that's where you move somebody from where they are today to someplace where they want to be in the future. And of course, retail means retailer. So we are an experience-based transformative retailer. And again, a lot of people come in and they think it's all about the tools. And you can't build an experience-based transformative retailer if you're focused on the tools. You've got to focus on the community, which is why we have all of these interesting and fun events. So Kevin Kelly has come and spoke a couple of times, and we have book night where we'll bring in authors and do discussions. We'll have the transhumanists or the Humanity Plus folks will come in like once a quarter. They'll have an event, a bio-curious event, every month, Internet of Things, wearables, women in health tech. I mean, these are it's part of a community. You've got this ongoing series of evening events that will attract people that they'll meet and create this unique community of creatives that then can go off and do interesting things together.
なるほどで
When was it? The very first overseas event or the opening entity was in Munich, and that's when?
I think last week, actually.
あそうなんですね
Yeah, it was just this month.
なるほどなるほど
And that was with the Technical University of Munich. There's an entrepreneurial organization called Entenheimer TUM, TUM, Technical University of Munich, that's funded by one of the wealthiest women in the world. She's a BMW shareholder. And then BMW funded like 300 memberships as well. So that funded that location. It just opened, so up and running.
海外で展開するにあたって
For this overseas deployment, how should I put it? Any particular things that were different or any different challenges that you might expect, things that are different from your U.S. deployment? Do you have that anticipation?
Yes. I mean, this is another reason why, and particularly in international context, we look for strong partners. Because even though, we believe, and I think it's fairly well proven, that making things is fundamental to what it means to be human. I mean, the opposable thumb, the first thing we did was build tools, and the tools we use to make things. And Carl Jung talks about it, and Maslow talks about it, and Hegel talks about it. So making things is fundamental to what it means to be human. It's not what it means to be American, it's what it means to be human. But how that plays itself out is going to vary within the local context, within the local national context. And so, I don't understand German making. I don't understand Japanese making. So we need to have a local partner that will help contextualize the parts of what we're doing in the maker movement and then make it appropriate for the country that we're in. Again, with an eye toward the reality that making is fundamental to what it means to be human. And so we may not be making now. Most Americans don't. But they will self-identify as makers in very high percentages. In other countries, they will still be makers, but they may not self-identify as that yet. It's coming.
ちょっと僕
That Ford example that you mentioned, that partnership, what I couldn't really understand is this. That's Detroit, right? Tech shop Detroit. Things that come out of tech shop Ford. Ford has titles in terms of patents. Ford has the rights to what will come out of a tech shop. Could you explain that? Because I wasn't really clear about that. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so Ford has the rights to anything that their employees come up with. It's a standard employment contract, at least in the U.S. But Ford is a big believer in open innovation, and as are we. So we don't take a piece of intellectual property. You own what you make. You own your own intellectual property. We just provide the tools. And Ford is a big believer in that. And the location is open to any other automotive company in the world. So General Motors and Chrysler comes through. BMW spent a lot of time on site trying to learn what Ford was doing. And the intellectual property lead at Ford has created a on-ramp system for capturing intellectual property from outside of Ford that is the best in the automotive industry. And so when I asked him, like, why are you allowing this to be an open innovation? And he says, well, Mark, I'm a car guy and I want cars to get better, and I believe open innovation will help make that happen. And so I'll compete not on the ideas, I will compete on how quickly and easily it is for the ideas to be monetized and brought into Ford. And it's a very forward-looking approach to open innovation and what it can mean.
なるほど。今まで多分いろんなその
I see. I understand that there are various partnerships progressing. I wonder if you have any particular types of partners that you are reluctant to partner with the potential partners. Is there any criteria as to who's attractive, who's not?
They self-select, right? We're pretty crazy, very dedicated to the open concept. And so those who are closed and those who aren't interested in what they're doing, they don't call. Then when we have the conversation, when somebody does call, we spend a lot of time talking through what the values are in the maker movement. I mean, the big part of my book is about the 9 core values within the maker movement. And they have to buy into those values in order for them to become a partner. So it's one of the most important components in the conversation.
なるほど。でそれをなんていうんですかね。
And how should I put it? So there's 9 core values. If they're shared with a certain company, how do you persuade them? Is it becoming more easier to talk with them? At least in the U.S., do you think that there are more companies that share those core values? Do you think?
It's getting easier. We're 9 years into this, and we've got 8 locations, and we now have kind of the economic impact. So the government agencies are getting very excited. I've got like a couple dozen governors across the United States are now talking to us about opening locations. Because here's why. The 3 locations in the Bay Area alone have created $12 billion in incremental shareholder value from members launching companies, $2 billion in annual sales, $200 million in annual salaries from 2,000 jobs. The state of California, at the 10% California state tax, is pulling $20 million out from employee pay on an annual basis from jobs and companies launched coming out of Tech Shop. We didn't spend $20 million opening the 3 locations. So this is one of the most efficient and effective jobs engines I've ever seen. And with the Ford example, it helps to unlock the cognitive surplus within a major corporation. And then it becomes a public good in the process. So like in St. Louis, we did a partnership with a developer. And developers are an important component in what we're doing. They've become major partners for us in like 4 different locations. And then Washington University in St. Louis funded a big piece, and then Boeing, Monsanto, and Purina, other big Fortune 100 companies are funding it. So between the city or the state, in combination with large corporations and universities, we're starting to see people come at us very, very quickly.
You mentioned the importance of prototyping and how funding was received for Square by prototyping. For the fabrication of the prototype, I understand that you're offering the environment for this, and you can see that what can be achieved through a prototype. But beyond that, whether it's a viable business or not, you have to build up a supply chain. And I guess that in a different sense, you'll have to do work that you've never done before. Under these circumstances, is there any kind of a support mechanism in place?
We call it hardware because it's hard. It's difficult to launch a hardware company. It doesn't scale like a software company where you just launch another server on AWS or a Fujitsu cloud. This is hardware. And we're still in the early days, so the service providers that would allow you to get to 1,000 units, 5 years ago were completely non-existent. They're becoming more available. But it's one of the biggest problems right now in this whole movement is the first 1,000 problem. But we're in discussions with some major manufacturing companies about what their future looks like within this new distributed manufacturing context and how they might be able to play an important role in enabling that. And I think you're going to see a number of folks start kind of helping solve that. Now, already, having said that, that's the kind of where we're going. 5 years ago, there was no such thing as a hardware accelerator. Right? There were 0. There were probably 1,000 software accelerators around the globe. It seemed like every telecommunications company had like 10 spread out. 0 hardware accelerators. Well, there are now 6. 3 of them are in the Bay Area. There's a window of opportunity here, right? There are 1,000 software accelerators spread out all over the globe. There are 6 hardware accelerators, all in the United States. 4 of them with direct connections to Shenzhen. There will eventually be hundreds of hardware accelerators with extensions to manufacturers around the globe. But nobody's doing that right now. It's a huge window of opportunity.
なるほど。で、そういった領域にも
And gradually, Tech Shop will be entering into those areas?
We probably will not do that ourselves. We're very friendly with all of the current hardware accelerators. It's a completely different business. I think we'll just be friends with many of them and encourage them to co-locate and work together. 3 of them launched within 5 blocks of our location in San Francisco purposely, so that they didn't have to buy equipment. They could launch their accelerator and send their teams to Tech Shop to get going.
でやっぱりその最初に
At first, we talked about the fact that we wanted to start a Panasonic of the 21st century or the Sony of the 21st century, but people are reluctant to do that, or people tend to think that's impossible for myself to do that. But if we lower the barriers, it'd be nicer. Under those circumstances, what do you think would be the message that you'd like to disseminate to encourage people to come to tech shop? How would you induce people to come to tech shop? Because if you set the goal too high, now people may want to change their careers, so they may commit themselves to that, but that alone will not create a large number of people coming to you.
So let me tell you the story about Tina Albanlock. So we've had a number of accidental entrepreneurs where they come in, they learn how to do something, and they accidentally start a company. So Tina came in on a Wednesday, took the laser cutter class, and we tell them in the class, you need to practice what you just learned within the next 2 days. So she was trying to figure out, what am I going to make on Friday in my 2-hour block at the laser cutter? And on Thursday, she got a call from her sister-in-law. And her sister-in-law said, you need to come by on Saturday to Bobby's birthday party. And so Tina says, okay, are you going to do cupcakes? Because that was the thing during that time, is to do cupcakes instead of a big cake. And she says, yeah, we're going to do cupcakes. Like, great, give me the names of the other kids that are going to be there, and I will make cupcake toppers out of bamboo with each of the kids' names. So this is like a 7 or 8 year old kid. All 7, 8 year old kids like to see their name physically instantiated in something. And so she shows up on Saturday, and everybody gets a cupcake topper. And what happened was, at the end of the party, the parents came, and little Bobby goes to mom and says, look what I got. And she says, that's nice, but your 2 sisters don't have one. And so they went to Tina and said, I'll give you $20 if you make one for the 2 sisters. I'll give you $40 for that. She walked out of that birthday party with $400 in orders, not being in business. She then had to get a business license and open a bank account and so forth. Well, she did $800 the next weekend, and then $1,600, and then $3,200, and then she launched an Etsy website that became so popular that when they started texting her with all of her orders, her BlackBerry was burning out inside of 4 hours. She disappeared for a while, and then she came back, and I asked her, Tina, where have you been? She says, well, my husband and I, when we got married, we couldn't afford a honeymoon. So we just took the last 6 months to travel around the globe. And she's making a couple $100,000 a year running her own little business that she started accidentally. That's not a bad outcome, right? And so to be more radical, because that's my job, quit your jobs. Stop working for somebody else. 200 years ago, we all worked for ourselves. We were on a farm. 97% of us were self-employed. And I don't agree with Karl Marx and Engels and others, but working for somebody else, you can't really reach the highest pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy unless you've got a lot of autonomy. And sometimes you get that in a company, sometimes you don't. Deloitte, the consulting firm, has already estimated in the United States 50% of us are going to be working for ourselves by 2030. Most people will not work for large corporations in the future. You're going to be working for small mom and pops that are doing distributed manufacturing. We already know this is true because this is a trend that's already started. Most of the jobs, all the growth in the United States in the last 20 years have come from small companies. The layoffs have come from the large companies. So we're encouraging, and this is starting to happen. Vivek Wadhwa, one of the gurus in the Silicon Valley, is telling his friends that are graduating, don't take a job with a big company, go take a job with an interesting startup, because that's where the fun is. That's where the autonomy is. That's where the impact is. That's where you pick up skills that are useful for the future. And so it actually begins to beg the question, why are you going to school? We've had a couple of people who have decided not to go to school. and instead learn how to make things and launch companies. One of them got accepted to MIT and didn't go. He's now a multimillionaire, and in a few months, he's going to turn 21. Not a bad outcome. I don't recommend it for everybody, by the way. But this is the new world. This is a completely different, the ability to design, develop, and manufacture something in quantities large enough to be self-sustaining is within your grasp.
そうなんですよね。お話としてはね、本当にそう。
Well, it's exactly as you say, but still, does anyone want to quit their jobs immediately tomorrow? Well, there was one person who had the hands up, but that's someone special. It's quite difficult to go that far. There are difficulties.
So start part-time. Don't do it full-time. Come in, learn how to do something, pursue a little bit on the side, an avocation of some kind. And it'll inform your job as well as maybe open up other opportunities. You don't have to quit your job to be able to play.
なるほど。今例えばそのテックショップ
Right now in tech shop, getting back to that schedule, there was a fashion seminar. And I realized that you're involved in fashion as well. And I suppose that there's going to be a lot of different domains where people are going to be fabricating things. Are there any interesting domains that you see right now?
Well, I love fashion, the kind of the mix-up of fashion and the Internet of Things, where what you're wearing has some kind of other use is a fascinating area. I'm also particularly interested in medical devices and 3D printing as a method for quickly developing a prototype in the kind of the medical field. But again, one of the fascinating things about the space is the tools are completely domain agnostic, right? They don't care what you use them for. And as a result, the variety of projects that are coming through is just mind-blowing. I started tweeting because the projects were so crazy. I remember, like, one of the first times I tweeted, I was sitting at my desk, and this guy's walking down the hallway. And he was like, I'm so glad I found you guys. I can't believe it. Like, where else am I going to be able to work on and store my lunar lander? Good question. Where else are you going to go to work on your lunar lander? Like, what in the world? So I went down the hallway. I was like, what do you mean a lunar lander? He's like, I'm working on a Google X Prize, and we're doing a lunar lander. Like, oh, okay, he's serious. And then another guy, staff goes, you got to meet. I think his name was Andy, and so I go over and I meet Andy, and I was like, what are you working on? He's like, I'm working on a desktop diamond manufacturing device. And I giggled, like, a what? A desktop diamond manufacturing device. Oh, okay. How does it work? And he says, it's easy. I'm like, well, no, it's not. If it were easy, we'd all have one, right? So he's crazy. The question is he crazy in a good way or a bad way? And I'm looking at this aluminum block that's got random gouges in it from where the CNC tool did things it wasn't supposed to. I go, well, okay, if it was so easy, what is this? He says, well, this is my pressure chamber. And I'm going to drive this to 9 atmospheres and pump hydrogen in this hole and methane in this hole and energy from a used magnetron from a microwave, and diamonds are going to fall out. I was like, yeah, maybe. Or you may just have a bomb. So it's going to just blow up. Well, it turns out he had 2 degrees in physics and started a diamond tool deposition company that had gone public. And so the diversity of projects they're in is reflective of the community that you're in. It's the entire community shows up. And they're working on some really crazy stuff.
なるほど。じゃあここら辺でちょっと
I see. Maybe we can take some questions from the floor. Any questions, anyone? Yes, I see a hand over there. Over there. Thank you. My name is Yokota. About manufacturing or makers, you showed us some of the successful examples. Were they mostly the individual efforts or the team efforts?
It's a combination. You know, the bigger projects like the motorcycle, that was a team. But like the lamp was an individual effort. Oru kayak was maybe 2 people. So it varies depending on kind of the complexity of the project and the skill base of the person that's there. But again, one of the nice things there is you can start off as an individual working on a project, discover that you don't have all the skills you need, and you actually start hiring people or getting co-founders from the community. I remember this one day I walked in and a young lady came up to me and says, thank you for building Tech Shop in San Francisco. I lost my job yesterday, and I decided I'd come in and pick up some skills and try to find another job. And I literally walked in, took the silk screening class, and at the end of the class was offered a job here at Tech Shop from a startup that needed somebody that knew how to silk screen. And so you can very rapidly build teams to make just about anything.
大丈夫ですか？
That answers your question? Yes, thank you. Any other question? Yes, that person at the very back. Any plans of establishing tech shop in Japan? Conversely, if you are going to establish one in Japan, what's the size of membership that is needed to break even? In other words, what is the critical mass? Tech shop? If I could answer part of your question, although the dates are not yet decided, Fujitsu partnership, under the partnership with Fujitsu, there'll be Tech Shop Japan as well.
I don't have an announcement to make yet, but we are actively
そういう会じゃない？あれ？
talking to people in Japan.
聞かなかったことしてる。
Okay, forget what I said. Oh, really? Okay. So forget what I said. So what's the size of the membership that you need at one location to justify setting up an establishment?
It varies from city to city. Our estimate for Tokyo is between 800 and 1,200 members, depending on the infrastructure cost to do the build out. So you have to model each one separately, but it about 800 on the low end, 1,200 maximum on the high end. It's good. It's a good question. It takes a community to make something like this happen.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
他に
Are there any other questions? We have a dangerous person. And please wait for the microphone.
いい話だったので。
Thank you very much for the very enjoyable presentation. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to just limit myself to 2 questions if I can. If it's fine with Mike. どうぞご自由に。
は
Then my first question is in regard to the laser cutter. You said that it was very addictive. That's a very fascinating machine. But with the evolution of technology, are there any machine areas that you're looking forward to and where possibilities may expand? What's the area where you're looking forward to the most in terms of machines?
So there's actually a fairly non-obvious answer to that question. And it's software-based. So currently, when you design something, there's some basic design tools. So you can learn one tool really well and you're good. But then you have to use a different computer-aided manufacturing software depending on the material that you want to use. So it turns out, for whatever reason, if you want to do it out of metal, you have to learn one CAM package. If you want to do it out of plastic, it's a different CAM package. If you want to do it out of wood, it's another CAM package. And so it turns out if you're trying to do something across 4 or 5 different types of materials, you have to learn 4 or 5 different computer-aided manufacturing pieces of software. Well, that's just insane. Like, we now have printers. We have this thing called PostScript from Adobe, and it doesn't matter what printer, it just works. And so that was one of our biggest conversations with Autodesk early on, was thank you for your software, thank you very much. Now fix the CAM problem, because that is the biggest rate limiter right now from our creative community launching cross materials. So the thing I really want to see is this CAM package solved. And Autodesk is working on it. They just spent like $400 million buying one of the largest CAM manufacturers in the world with the objective to be able to make it go cross, domains. So great question, non-obvious answer.
ありがとうございます。あと2つ目の質問は、
Thank you. My second question is in regard to the fact that you have plans to broaden your activities throughout the world. But you've talked about a lot of cases of what can be done in a single tech shop. If we connect all of the tech shops throughout the world, then is there going to be something that will be possible as a result of this global connectivity? Is there any vision that you have of anything new that can be possible as a result of this global connectivity of tech shops?
I believe that a substantial segment of the economy of making things is going to become local, sustainable, customized, and personal. Because if you can buy a desk that was built at the right height for your knees and that had used material that was produced locally by an artist you collaborated with to create some intricate, inlay, and it only cost you another 20% or 30% more because robots are doing the work, why would you buy a standard desk at a local IKEA? The answer is you wouldn't unless you really needed to save that last 30%. And I believe that's going to happen with fashion, with clothing, with hardware, with all kinds of things. You're going to buy a watch from a local watch manufacturer, and you'll know them, and you'll inform them what it is, how you want your watch made. And I think that could be 10, 15, 20, 30% of the manufacturing economy. So it's distributed, it's local, it's sustainable, it's customized, and it's personal. And that's being driven by artificial intelligence, robotics, distributed manufacturing technologies, advanced manufacturing technologies. And then you layer in the artist community and the design community. And we end up in a completely different kind of space. And we're seeing that in the United States after the 2008 downturn, people are buying fewer shirts, but the shirts that they buy are more expensive, have higher quality, and often come with a story of some kind. And so we're living more intentionally, and by living more intentionally, it's being enabled by this new manufacturing revolution. So I believe we're going to move into a completely different space. So yes, we'll have 1,000 locations globally. It'll be enabled local entrepreneurs to create custom, personalized projects and products for people within their community in ways we've never seen before. Or we have seen it, it just was 200 years ago, and it was much more expensive.
よろしいでしょうか。ありがとうございます。ちょっと一つだけ
Just one thing that I'd like to ask about. For example, if you bought a refrigerator, then perhaps there was about 5 or 6 manufacturers from which you could select from. That was the only choice that was available for a refrigerator up until now. But even for refrigerators, do you think that options will increase more and more? Will we be able to live in an era where we can have more choice, even in a thing even when we're selecting refrigerators?
I checked recently on the General Electric website how many colors and finishes I could get my refrigerator. It's 7. Really, 7. Like white, black, yellow, stainless steel. I don't know how to get to 7. That's insane. Like, why would I only have 7 choices? when I could get a local artist to do a veneer on it for a couple $100, they could come in and completely modify it, and they could put my kid's entire life history laser etched in a nice piece of wood that sat on it that matched the rest of my cabinets. Why would I not? Why would I not do that? One of the stories I tell, when I became a senior project manager, it was like I finally made a certain economic threshold. So my wife and I went out and bought a furniture set from Ethan Allen, a big manufacturing company, and we spent $12,000. And it's got a nice table and cabinets and so forth. And I felt good about that for 6 months or a year. Certainly less time than it took me to pay it off. So that's what I did 20 years ago. If I were to do it today, my wife and I would work together in the wood shop and we would make it. It would cost us about $1,000, and we would have created an heirloom that I would have been proud to see every time I walked in the door. And okay, maybe I wouldn't do it, but I'd hire an artist that I knew in the Silicon Valley who had a furniture business and could make it for $13,000. Yeah, I'd pay an extra $1,000 to have it made to my specification with my customization, and I get to be involved in the process. And we know psychologically that if you're involved in the process in any way, you ascribe to yourself, I made that, even though you didn't. But if you were involved in the process, you say, I made that. So this is a table that I made, that I was involved in. And economically, we already know at a minimum, if you're involved in any kind of activity, in any little bit, you value the object at twice the going rate for the regular manufacturer.
でそのいわゆる
So the area of handmade manufacturing, conventionally you wouldn't want to create your own refrigerator, but building your motorcycles, you won't try that. So you're saying that the scope of that is going to expand as well. So the point is here, the home appliances manufacturers have been focusing on home appliances, and they were the only source for us. But that's going to change, you think?
No, it varies by category. So you pick one that actually is very difficult. The compressors for refrigerators turn out to be very high-tech and very difficult to get right, and there are very few people who actually know how to do that well. And they don't currently sell you the compressor as a component. So it'd be difficult to get into the appliance manufacturing. But that's not the interesting part anyway. The interesting part is the veneer and what it looks like. The interesting part is an API that you can plug into that do interesting things with your refrigerator. And they're working on, GE's already building that API. Other categories will completely fall to the local person. Motorcycles might be one of them, because you can buy an engine off the shelf. You can buy a transmission. You can now form you can do there's a whole cafe racer thing. So I think that category is interesting. So it's going to vary from category to category. You're not going to build your own aircraft, right? It's too big, but there are nice chunks of the economy that I think are going to give way to the customization, personalization piece.
なるほど。その時にだからいわゆる今その
If I could dig in further, the so-called big players, for example, GE in the US, those manufacturers, would those companies see the encroachment of their business domains, do you think? So eventually, maybe they won't disappear altogether, but their business is going to shrink. Is that the direction, do you think? Or do you think that companies like GE will have different values that will enable them to survive? And if that's the case, why is that possible?
So GE is a really interesting case. Beth Comstock, their chief marketing officer, I think is one of the most brilliant executives on the planet right now. And the reason I believe that is because she's making some very interesting bets around open innovation and specifically this play. So they've partnered with two companies that most large CMOs would never have heard of. Corky, which is, I believe, properly named because it's kind of a weird company. Ben Kaufman's the CEO. And what they have is an open platform where anybody can submit an idea, and then the community, upwards of 2,500 people or more, will iterate on it until they've refined a specification, and then Ben and his team choose which one they'll actually make. Well, GE invested in Ben's company, a very substantial amount of money, and are now using that as a front-end process for helping to develop a specification, which is fascinating. Again, I come out of hardware new product development, and we would spend 6 months to a year developing a specification, and you do all kinds of human research, human-centric design, and you do your focus groups and so forth. This thing takes 6 months to a year. GE did the spec in 60 days using this process. 60 days. They didn't have an idea of what their in-window air conditioner was going to look like on November 1st of 2013. Here's the killer. And it was on the shelf in volume by Mother's Day of the following year. 6 months. Start to finish. 6 months. Major new platform. So this is kind of GE's response. And the other investment they made is with First Build out of Louisville. Well, their First Build is actually out of Phoenix, but they've opened a micro manufacturing location in their appliance division to launch new appliance ideas. So she's embracing this, and who better to understand how to build a micro manufacturing location than somebody like a GE or a Samsung or a Fujitsu or a Flextronics. So I think there's opportunity to embrace it. Ignoring it would be insane.
なるほど、そうですよね、あと5分ぐらいって言ってたんで、
We only have about 5 minutes remaining, so perhaps we can have 1 or 2 more questions. Are there any other questions? Yes, we have someone. In regard to the American startups, there are startups that can begin with $300 or $500 and with some warehouse space and Wi-Fi, then you can start. But then there's the 3D printers or the tools or quite expensive facilities that you need. So you're probably investing about several $1 million, and yet you have people that can use it for $125 a month. And I'm wondering how it pays off. Would you care to comment on that?
It's a positive across the locations have been open for a year. We've found a way to be able to make money at the business. And it isn't just memberships, it's also the training, and it's also some other things that we're building out. It's not a software company. I mean, it's not incredibly profitable, but it's profitable enough. And we'll build that. I mean, our objective right now is to build the brand and build the locations out and then add revenue streams in as we move forward. And they will become quite profitable as we add these new revenue streams in. We've already identified some of them. Our objective right now is to build the network out as quickly as we can. It's a good question.
これからまだまだなんかその新しいそのマネタイ
So for monetization, I suppose that you'll be finding new forms of monetization from here onwards as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. There are a bunch of very obvious ways of increasing the revenue. But our economic impact is becoming so strong that we're getting other people to fund the core location. And so, in a sense, the cost to Tech Shop to open a new location is $0, right? Because somebody else funds it. And so the return on investment is infinite at that point.
大丈夫ですか？じゃあ最後もう一個。はい。
Maybe one final question? Yes. This is not my question, but this morning, a Serbian, Palilo, I met this person for the very first time. I talked with him over Skype. And I told him that I'm going to be meeting Mark Hatch. Do you have any questions or do you have any ideas? And Tech Shop was new to me, but anyway, this Serbian guy sent a chat box. I'm going to read it.
Watched a few tech shop video, and I must say that the idea is amazing, but I do have a few remarks. Firstly, I think that tech shop workshop are suitable for making your first prototype of product. But if someone wishes to start mass production, he would still need some capital and bigger facility. で、若林さんも
And Wakabayashi-san, I think, asked a similar question, right? I think. And this Serbian talks about his hypothesis. I'm going to read that part.
Therefore, I believe that the next step for tech shop would be to get in contact with investors and connect them with the tech shop members ということです。それで、secondly, tech shop facilities are now available only within the US. So I would ask Mark if they are planning on opening new facilities anywhere else in the world. ということで、まあ彼のために
So my question is, do you have any plan to open in Serbia, former Yugoslavia? Do you have any plans to go there?
We have our European partner is the largest retailer in Europe, Adeo Group. We're working with Leroy Merlin. It was a 5-unit deal, and they're opening 5 locations. They want to do dozens beyond that. And we'll look to them to decide where it makes sense to open in Europe. As far as the previous question, yes, working capital is a very real issue when you deal with hardware. It's not so much on the software side. And so managing your cash and taking a 500-unit order instead of a 2,000-unit order is important. You need to understand what kind of capital you have available. And yes, one of the potential revenue streams longer term is to collaborate with a bank to help solve the working capital problem that's very evident in our locations. Great couple questions there.
大丈夫でしょうか。
Thank you very much, special information.
Thank you.
はいということで、今日はちょっと
With that, this evening has passed by very quickly, but we've heard many interesting things. We hope that this will be helpful for your future business and for your future lives. And I believe that you must have received a very positive impact. Once again, let us offer Mr. Hatch a round of applause. Mr. Hatch, Mr. Wakabayashi, thank you very much. Let's offer a round of applause for Mr. Wakabayashi, who moderated this session as well.